To the Point with Kelly Dunn and Michael Williams.
In the solemn setting of a military funeral, protesters shout and stand out with their anti-gay signs. The Supreme Court says the right to free speech protects them. Now one legislator wants them pushed away. Good morning and welcome to The Point. I'm Michael Williams alongside Kelly Dunn, and our guest today is State Representative Pat Rooney, a Republican representing the northern section of Palm Beach County. We thank you for taking time to join us.
Thanks.
You're working on legislation to keep these protesters away. We've seen this happen in several instances in the Treasure Coast, and we're talking primarily about this Westboro group out of Kansas, which is arguing against homosexuality and has decided to use funerals for people who've fallen in the line of duty to this country as a base for their protests. Talk about your legislation, and a Supreme Court ruling says you can't keep them away.
You can't keep them away, Mike. That's correct. What we're trying to do really is create a buffer zone, though, that allows for the free speech to happen, but at a safe distance, and we've come up with 500 feet, but at a safe distance so that the people that are involved with the funeral, the grieving mother, father, brother, sisters, can have that place of solemnity where they can grieve, but at the same time, far enough away that the protesters can still be heard and can do what they want to do, but again, create some really a safety zone is how I look at it, because when you're dealing with these kind of emotions, I just feel like you're playing with fire here. You're at some point, someone's not going to treat this like, oh, they're just protesters. They're going to take it personally.
And I mean, the Supreme Court does say it's free speech. Do you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely. I think it is free speech, but free speech is not absolute, Kelly. There can be reasonable time, place, manner restrictions on free speech by the government determines, just like you can't yell fire in a crowded movie hall. This is another situation where we're trying to find that balance where you can say, hey, we want to allow you to protest, do what you want to do, but at the same time, because of safety concerns, for the potential for an incendiary incident to happen, let's come up with some kind of a boundary here.
What is your sense of the chances of passage of this in the legislature?
I actually think it's not bad, Mike. We just came before our first committee. There were some concerns on the committee about the free speech and the government trying to intrude on that free speech with this legislation. But believe it or not, the ACLU talked to us about a week ago and said, if you don't just restrict this to military funerals, if you open it up to all funerals, which I'm completely fine with, if it's a police officer or an EMT or even a child. If you remember when U.S. Representative Gabby Giffords got shot, the little girl in that situation, the 9-year-old girl, this church wanted to protest her funeral. So I am fine with making this a rule for all funerals, and because of that broadening of it, we actually did have some concerns from some of the committee members that said maybe this is going a little too far.
Have you gotten input from families of military? We
have. We got several emails and calls from some of the families, specifically some up in the Treasure Coast, where some of these funerals were being targeted, saying thank you, we appreciate it. And again, we view it as a private event, and while we're for free speech, that's why our children died for this country. At the same time, we'd like a little area where we can respectfully grieve those that have been killed.
We'll keep you at home posted on your prospects for this in the legislature as you pick it up. We want to turn, if we may, Representative, to the issue of gambling. It's all over the news now about building mega casino-style resorts in Broward and Miami-Dade, but also allowing some form of gambling to take place here. Now, I understand you're the president of Palm Beach Kennel Club, and you, because of conflict of interest, can't talk specifically about that venue. But your overall thoughts about bringing much more in the way of gambling to the state of Florida?
You know, Mike, I view it again as kind of a fairness aspect. If you're going to have certain rules for certain entities, you should allow all the entities to be playing under the same rules. And if the Indians are going to be allowed to have certain types of games, or if other parimutuel facilities are going to be able to have certain types of games, let those communities vote on it. I'm not opposed to having a county-wide vote. Let those communities vote on it to say, we want to have those same types of products here in Palm Beach County, for instance. So gaming as a whole, this state became involved in gaming in the mid to late 80s with the lottery. At that time, The state sanctioned it. Like my dad always said, they went from being our partner and our regulator to being our competitor in terms of the relationship with the pari-mutuels. So at that point, Florida really made a concerted effort to become involved in gaming and to promote it. So you've got gaming out there, and trying to take that moral argument out of this equation, which I understand is difficult, but if you take that out, is it a tourist attraction? Is it something that helps with jobs and the economy here? Absolutely. So let's figure out, again, a way to comprehensively deal with it so that we're not at a competitive disadvantage to some of our counties to the south.
Certainly gambling can be addictive. Everybody knows that. Compulsive gamblers, have their own groups to go to as well to get help. If we have more gaming facilities, might we be kind of, creating more addicted people, those addicted to gambling, or hurting the poorer people who might just spend more money just in that hope of getting rich?
Absolutely, Kelly. I mean, that's something that we're cognizant of at the track. We have compulsive gambling programs to help those people. And yeah, if you're going to have more gambling, you have more possibilities for people to get addicted to it. But it's just like everything in our society. If you look at bars or fast food restaurants, there's all things out there that are bad for us. But at the same time, we as a free society say these are things that we get some enjoyment, most of the people get some enjoyment out of it, and they can regulate themselves and enjoy it. So,
Representative, this has been a long history of debate about bringing gambling to this state, and we've always tried to fence it in. You have pari-mutuels, you have different things that people could argue are gambling, but full-on casino-style gambling, there's always been that line in the sand in Florida. Why fundamentally do you think the state needs it? And do you worry that once again Florida's falling into or being mesmerized by a get-rich-quick scheme that's supposed to bring hundreds of thousands of jobs, the proponents say billions of dollars? Is this once again a state that's looking too closely at quick fixes instead of long-term fixes for the economy?
It could be, Mike, and I'll concede that. But I think at least for the Destinations Casino, and I'm not speaking for or against it, but what I think the idea behind that is to, again, let's have a comprehensive look at it. Let's put it where those counties have already approved more of the full-scale gambling that's been going on elsewhere, and then are we going to get the jobs and the economic impact out of it? I don't know, but that if you're able to get 10,000 jobs or 40,000 jobs, some of these studies that they're saying, that's going to have a big impact on your economy if you do that. Is the state
and the state government cutting the amount of money spent on gambling prevention programs?
I read about that. I mean, that's, I guess, a determination that they made to put some of that money into just the general revenue because, again, we're faced with another deficit situation. That's something that I don't agree with. That money is supposed to be earmarked for a specific purpose, and I'm one of the legislators. So I have issues, Kelly, when you're dealing with anything that are earmarked, like trust funds and those types of things that are supposed to go to certain, like transportation or whatever, and you take them out of that. Now listen, I understand we're in unprecedented times when you're looking at a $4 billion deficit last year and probably a $2 billion this year, and you have to find ways, if you're not going to raise taxes, which I'm against, to finding those ways to deal with it. But at the same time, I'm really protective of those types of trust funds and where they're supposed to go.
Bottom line, quickly, before we turn to another political question, would you want to see eventually, if it was a fair playing field, some kind of mega resort come to the Palm Beaches or Treasure Coast, if they're going to get them, and it's a big if still, in Broward or Miami-Dade? Bottom line.
If they're going to get them, I think that's something, again, assuming that the people here would vote on it and vote positively, absolutely.
We have a presidential primary coming up in Florida. You have endorsed Mitt Romney, came in third in the Republican straw ballot. What will it take for Mitt Romney to do better in the upcoming primary? That's
a great question, Kelly. I think he just needs to continue to stay his course and to continue to be kind of the solid 20 to 25% where he's at in a lot of the polls that I've seen, where you see guys like Kaine or Gingrich or Michelle Bachmann, they go up and down, but Romney seems to be steady. And that's really what I like about him. I know there's some concern there that he's not, for whatever reason, taking the lead, but that's the part of this whole process. It's a feeling out process with people. They want to see the pros and cons of each one of these candidates, and I think it shows that a lot of people haven't made up their minds yet. But I like the fact that Mitt has been able to keep that 20-25% throughout pretty much this whole debate.
Aside from the numbers alone, though, why fundamentally Mitt Romney? Why is he your guy?
It just basically came down to two things with me, Mike. It was both public experience as well as private experience. A lot of these guys either either have too much public experience and no private experience, or vice versa. I like the fact that Mitt has run some companies and has been involved in the private sector. I think, speaking for somebody like myself, that really helps. It gives you a nice perspective when you go somewhere to Tallahassee or Washington, real world experience. But I also like the fact that he's been involved in government. He knows how government works. For some of these candidates that haven't, it does take a little bit of a learning curve to get up to speed, to be effective, and to know what needs to be done. So those are really the two reasons why I went with him.
A final question about gambling. If you were a betting man, would you bet on the Steelers returning to the Super Bowl?
Wow, that's a toughie. You know, it's like everything else in football, that one week they look great, the next week they don't look so great. I give them a good chance. They have a bye week this week, and then we have Kansas City and Cincinnati. If we can win those two games, I think they're going to Indianapolis.
You hid your black and gold beneath the set there today. So,
exactly.
We appreciate it. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
To be with us, and a good holiday to you and yours.
Exactly. They're having a couple of big parties. He's already fasting, so he can get ready to eat double on Thanksgiving.
There you go.
Coming up next, a candidate stops in South Florida. Will this be his do-or-die state? And now joining us is political analyst and coordinator of the American Studies program at Lynn University, Robert Watson. Thank you very much for being here today, and we have a lot to cover, and we're going to begin with this. Presidential candidate Herman Cain rolling into South Florida last week, making a number of stops while raising money and trying to win over voters. He is the first Republican presidential candidate this year to go on a multi-city tour in Florida. Our Evan Axelbank was able to get in a couple of questions about Florida and Cain's recent stumble when Cain forgot what he was saying about Libya.
Mr. Cain, can you win the nomination if you don't win Florida? Can you win the nomination if you don't win Florida?
No.
You cannot. You must win Florida.
Got it. Well, let's just say we got to finish first and second in Florida, but we're planning to win it.
Has Newt replaced you as flavor of the month?
No. Polls are going to change. They always do. We're not worried about it. I mean, the fact of the matter is, they'll probably change again in another month. So we don't get upset about 1 week change in the polls, you know?
Why did you talk about foreign policy first in your speech? Is it because of the Libya gaffe?
Guys, no question.
Is it because of the Libya gaffe?
No.
Come on, let's go.
And Cain surprised a lot of pundits when he won the straw ballot in Florida. Is he in the position to win again?
Well, he better be now, because shockingly, he said that he needs to win Florida. I can't believe he made such a comment. You know, in politics,
or come in first, or I mean, second or third.
Right,
I mean,
but he was initially saying, it's a must-win kind of situation. You know, you always lower expectations in politics, so that if you do get in second place, you can herald it as a victory. You know, if he comes in a third, it's going to be perceived as a defeat. Whereas if he said, wow, I'm facing a tough challenge, and, you know, 4 months ago, he would have been happy with the third place. But Florida's key for him for a couple of reasons. One, as you correctly noted, it was in late September in the Republican straw poll here, the Presidency 5 poll, that Cain came out of nowhere and won it with double digits. He went from Herman Who to the Herminator almost overnight as a front runner. Also, remember that Florida's not just the road to the White House for the general election, the Florida primary. Back in 2008, John McCain and Mitt Romney were in a nail-biter here in Florida. Romney took much of that important I-4 corridor, but down here in southeast Florida, McCain beat him soundly. It was enough to push McCain over the top, give him the nomination. These are lessons not lost on Herman Cain's people.
There was a time when the foreign policy stumbles such as his and the allegations of sexual harassment, which he has vehemently denied, would have been enough to sink a campaign. Depending on the poll, he may not be in first, but he's not far out. Is it just a changing view of how people look at candidates and this whole process?
Yeah, you know,
can he survive it?
Sure, it's a tough thing. You know, Hitler and Napoleon didn't learn the lesson that you don't fight a war on two fronts. One scandal is tough to deal with. Two scandals, you know,
yeah, well, we need to be careful that we're not comparing them to...
No, not comparing. Anyone knows that you don't fight it on two fronts. Any candidate knows you focus on one thing at a time. He's dealing with two distractions. It's hard with the social media today and the 24/7 news coverage to get back on message. This is becoming a huge distraction for him. He's pretty much handled it textbook how not to. He's got to get out in front of this. Plus in Florida, it's important. In Florida, Florida's a state that looks closely at foreign policy. We have a lot of veterans who want to look at national security policy, large Jewish American population that's looking at the Middle East and Israel, large Latino, Cuban American population, which is looking south of the border and looking at Latin America. So this is a place where he needs to really bone up on his foreign policy credentials. Stumbles like Libya, where he appeared to not have any idea what was happening in Libya, and that wasn't his first. The silly Uzbekistan, Becky Stan song or rap or whatever that was, it was an embarrassment, it was distracting. So he's got to get down here in Florida and start to turn this ship of state around.
Well, why is he the only one so far who's gone on this kind of multi-city tour in our state?
Wait 5 minutes. It'll be like the weather in Florida. It'll change. They're all coming down here. Everybody visits our area here because it's a rich area for fundraising. It's a large county geographically, Palm Beach County. This area is very critical for the election. The I-4 corridor, the Gulf Coast, all of them will be here stumping. All of them will be here. They're all running media buys in Florida. They're all looking at it, radio spots. Everyone will be back.
All right, coming up next, we'll be taking a closer look at some of the political ads you're seeing.
You've probably already started seeing the political ads, and as we get closer to the January primary here, you'll be seeing even more of them across our region in the state of Florida. So we want to examine them. Let's take a look first at an anti-Obama ad.
Two presidents, two visions.
Should you raise taxes on anybody right today, rich or poor or middle class? No.
This morning, Obama is scheduled to unveil a new tax on Americans.
Pay higher taxes. Taxes.
I personally don't believe we ought to be raising taxes. It won't solve the problem.
A political stunt, not a solution. A bill full of tax increases.
Pass this bill. Pass this bill. Pass this bill.
President Obama, it's time to attack problems, not people.
Your reaction to that ad, and I would note, though, as part of it, that there are surveys that show many middle-class Americans say we're going to need a mix of higher taxes, but on the wealthy, not them. But this goes right to the heart of this debate in 2012.
Sure. Well, I'm a middle-class, Floridian middle-class American. My taxes have gone down. But in politics, perception is reality. This is a very good, a very effective ad. And this organization that's running this ad, American Crossroads, anybody that follows politics is very familiar with them. In 2010, during the midterm election, they were one of the biggest attack ad sponsors. They spent over $50 million making sure that Republicans would defeat Democrats in key states. They're running this ad in all the important big swing states like Florida, Pennsylvania, Ohio, as well as mid-sized swing states, North Carolina, Colorado, and it's a $2.6 million ad buy this early. One thing to say for sure about this ad, you ain't seen nothing yet. We're going to be inundated with this kind of negative attack ad. In fact, the only upside of all this, I think it could be a little economic stimulus. There's going to be so much money spent on ads. We could see billions of dollars of this over the next year.
What do you think of having former President Clinton in that ad?
Oh, it's so effective. You initially look at it, you think it's a Democrat running the ad who's pro-Bill Clinton. And all the tricks of the trade are in there. Bill Clinton's in color and complimentary. Obama's in black and white and looking sour. They throw the T word, the tax word in there multiple times. It's textbook. It's a fantastically effective ad. And we're going to see, as I said, a lot more of this. And a lot of the organizations like American Crossroads are complementing these TV ad campaigns with radio buys, billboards, so it's a multimedia approach.
And with the Supreme Court ruling, we're going to see so much of this on both sides, much more unfettered access to that kind of political money that it'll be
You're spot on.
a non-stop season. Let's take just briefly a look at a pro-Obama ad. We'd like your analysis on that as well.
Sure.
What if middle-class families were finally given the podium so that politicians finally listen to us? Instead of fighting for millionaires and corporations, we tell them to create millions of new jobs for our families, reward companies who hire returning veterans, rebuild roads and modernize our kids' schools. Okay, so maybe we don't really have the podium, but we do have the plan. We all need to tell Congressman West, pass the President's Jobs Act now.
Is this one more or less effective than the first one we saw?
This is effective also. Of course, this is one of the biggest unions in the country, the state and the county municipal workers union. And unions have been under assault in key states like Wisconsin, Ohio, these key important states to winning. And this is not just their only ad. They have a series of these ads. One of their ads is showing black and white images of Republican leaders. And as unpopular as Obama may be, the Republican Party and Congress in general is even less popular. So what they're doing with this ad is they're are trying to get back and channel old Harry Truman in 1948, who pushed a whole series of measures from the expansion of the GI Bill, expansion of Social Security, national health insurance, and so forth, all of which were defeated by the Republicans. Truman then labeled them the do-nothing Congress, obstructionist, and they're interfering with middle-class Americans. I think Obama's trying to do this through this particular proxy. And this ad that you just watched, this AFSCME campaign, they're running it in 18 critical House seats, 3 critical Senate seats, so they're looking at all those swing seats that they feel that a Democrat might pick off a Republican.
And, Doctor, does it not come down to the fundamental debate of 2012? How do we get the country running again, and whose money do we use to jumpstart that process? And within that debate, what some describe as class warfare, others say it's a legitimate debate about how we prioritize. But that's what you see with these ads.
I think you're spot on. And back to your comment right before we went into the ad, you know, there was the famous or infamous Supreme Court case in Citizens United versus the FEC. And what it did is it allows these, it basically gutted campaign finance. You have organizations like Swift Boat Veterans for the Truth on one side or MoveOn.org on the other. They call them 527s for Section 527 of the Federal Elections Code. These groups can now spend an unlimited amount of unregulated, unreported money, and what they do is they spend 99% of this on these negative attack ads. Somebody's got to win this race next year, and the country is going to be in no mood for cooperation or conciliation after ingesting billions of dollars of negative attack ads.
We'll be back with more right after this. And our thanks to Dr. Robert Watson for joining us today. Sorry, we couldn't have the Watson wrap-up. We were out of time next week.
I want equal time.
You'll get it. We got a whole 2012 campaign. As always, thank you for taking time to join us.
That's right. Have a great Sunday. See you next week.